Before we begin working on our scarecrow selfie today, we need to give a few quick reminders about how we use our oil pastels. So on the table you have a tray with four boxes of oil pastels. Remember, oil pastels are a little bit oily, so they will get a little bit messy. If your hand goes over, or if your hand touches or goes over, before we begin working on our scarecrow selfie using oil pastel, let's give us a quick reminder on how to use the oil pastels. Now remember, at your table you have a tray and you should have 4 boxes. You're going to grab 1 box of oil pastels for yourself, all right? And try to keep the oil pastels in the middle of the table so that if they accidentally don't fall off the edge of the table. So keep them in a safe space right above your artwork, right over here on the side. Now oil pastels, remember, we are using 1 color at a time. When you take 1 color out and you are finished using that color, you will put it back and grab the next color. Now another quick tip is if your hand touches the oil pastel and you move it across, it's going to smear the color. So be mindful of when you're working. My tip is when you're using the oil pastel to make sure that your oil pastel is touching the paper and not your hand, and drawing like this. Your hand is kind of above the paper. Now today we are going to use the oil pastel to color in a special few places on our artwork. We are not going to color all of our scarecrow selfie. We're going to pick some small shapes and some small special areas to color inside. I'm going to use the color orange to color inside my heart-shaped eyes. When I'm coloring, I'm being mindful and coloring in slowly inside the shape, picking one direction to color in, which is up and down. Remember, when you are using the oil pastels, they're a lot softer than crayons, so if you color way too hard, they might accidentally break. And try to keep the paper on the oil pastel so that your hands don't get as messy. When you are coloring in your special few shapes, if your oil pastel goes over another color, like for example, where I'm coloring there's black, if I color over the black, they will start to mix. So if that happens, it's not a big deal. It happened a little bit in my nose. So what I'm going to do is just color over some of the black that's smudged in. So it's just a beautiful oops, and we just put the color back. And I have finished coloring in my few special areas in my artwork. These are mostly small details in my artwork, like my buttons, my shapes near my mouth, my eyes and my nose, and the flower on top of my hat. Now, behind our scarecrow is the background, and right now it's looking pretty simple. And remember, we talked about the purpose of our scarecrows. They are to scare away crows. So using the black crayon, I'm going to add a few details in my background, and I'm going to draw some crows. Now to draw a crow in the background, it's a very simple line. It's going to be a curved line. It's going to go up, it's going to come back down, and it's going to curve out, just like the same on the other side. Now, if you want to draw it a different way, different from what I just showed you, you can draw or write the letter W, and on the ends of the W, you can give it a long curvy line, and that'll also look like a crow. So I'm going to add a few more crows in my background because I have scared them away and they are now flying away from my crops. When you are finished adding your crows in your background and you've double checked that you have colored in your special small areas, make sure that all your colors are back in your oil pastel nicely and neatly. And we are going to return them to the tray also nicely and neatly. Now we are ready to begin painting. Now, the oil pastel is known as a resist when painting. Resist means to stop. So whenever the paint is near or touching the oil pastel, the paint is going to stop. So we're going to be using a painting technique called oil resist. Let's say it together. Oil resist. All right, let's talk about our paints. On our tray, we have 2 sets of paints right here. We're going to keep them nicely and neatly on the tray. And these are dry paints, and we need to wake them up with water. So using your brush carefully and mindfully, like a ballerina dancing on its tippy toes, not scooting on its bum bum bum. All right, that's a funny looking ballerina. We need to wake up these paints. So a little trick is to get your brush wet, and you're going to bring your wet brush into the color that you want to use, and you need to wake it up. And I like to start a little mini swimming pool in my paint. So I'm gonna get a little bit more water, kind of wipe off a little bit, and I'm gonna put some water into the blue and create a little swimming pool. And let's move it over so you guys can see a little bit better. And a quick reminder, whenever you are using one color and you are ready to use a new color, if you dip your brush into the next color, you're gonna get it dirty. And if that happens, it's okay. Just make sure you wash out your brush, and with clean water, you're going to gently wipe that dirty color that we don't want, wash it out, and go back in another time and make sure it's really the color that we want and wash it out. And every time you switch colors, let's say I am ready to use yellow, you're going to wash out your brush, and there's a towel in your basket, and you're gonna wipe it off gently. You don't have to squeeze it, just kind of dip your brush back and forth on the towel, wet your brush again, and then you're ready to go into your next color. For today, we are only going to paint our scarecrow. So we're not going to worry about painting our background. We're just going to paint our scarecrow, which means our face, our body, and our hat. I'm going to start by painting my face, and my yellow has not woken up yet, so I'm going to put a little mini swimming pool inside and wake up my yellow. Notice I'm not digging my brush into the yellow. That's too hard. I'm gently going around and waking it up, all right? And when I'm painting, I'm going to paint in one direction. Maybe that's up and down, maybe that's side to side, all right? Now, because we used oil pastel, it acts as a resist, so you can paint right over your oil pastel. And sometimes you're really gonna have to spread it. If you accidentally get too much paint, let's say I'm putting on too much paint, and if that happens, all you have to do is wash out your brush, take a little bit of clean water, and just spread that paint so that we can see your oil pastel. We should always be able to see your oil pastel because you worked really hard on your drawing. You don't want to cover it all up with paint. So I'm just gliding my brush back and forth, painting right over my oil pastel because it is acting as a resist. It is telling the paint to stop. You will not go over me. It's a little bit easier to see when I use a darker color, but when I put my blue in my area that I'm painting right over my oil pastel, and the oil pastel that is yellow still stays yellow because it is a resist. Now, if you see a pool of paint, you want to make sure you spread all that paint because you don't want it just sitting there. You want to spread that beautiful color. Now, as you're painting close to the edge of your painting, make sure your messy mat is underneath your artwork so you can paint all the way to the edge and really spread that paint. When you are finished painting your scarecrow, make sure you wash out your brush mindfully and carefully, dry off your brush, and return your brush facing up in your black basket. With 2 hands, take the painting, your wet painting, to the drying rack.